Hey there, and welcome to Real Talk Horror. I'm your host, Josh Bell, and I couldn't be more thrilled to kick off a brand new season of deep dives, dark twists, and spine-chilling cinema. This season, we're dedicating our episodes to exploring the career of one of horror's most visionary directors, someone who has redefined terror on the screen and created some of the genre's most iconic, unforgettable films, the legendary John Carpenter. Carpenter's work is an incredible blend of tension, atmosphere, and craft, from the unrelenting masked terror of Halloween to the mind-bending paranoia of The Thing. His filmography runs the gamut of horror, from supernatural scares and sci-fi suspense to thrillers that keep you on the edge of your seat. His movies are a masterclass in how to build atmosphere and wield suspense like a weapon, pulling you into his unique vision and refusing to let go. And it's not just about the scares. Carpenter's storytelling is layered with subversive social commentary, making each film not only frightening, but often thought-provoking as well. In this season of Real Talk, we'll break down Carpenter's work, movie by movie. We'll get into his signature style, his groundbreaking use of practical effects, his hauntingly unforgettable musical scores, and of course, the terrifying and captivating creatures and killers he brings to life. We'll explore how Carpenter's films have left a mark on horror cinema and inspired generations of filmmakers who are still chasing that unique Carpenter magic. So grab some popcorn, turn down the lights, and get ready for a thrilling season-long journey into the career of a true horror maestro. Alright, horror fans, let's take a look at the man behind the lens. John Carpenter. Born in 1948 in Carthage, New York, Carpenter was raised in Bowling Green, Kentucky. His passion for filmmaking started early, and he found himself captivated by classic westerns, sci-fi thrillers, and of course, the horror films that would go on to shape his unique cinematic voice. Carpenter wasn't just watching movies, he was dissecting them, absorbing the techniques and the tension building that would eventually define his works. As he came of age, Carpenter took his passions to USC's prestigious film school in Los Angeles, and he couldn't have picked a better time to be there. USC was a breeding ground for future icons, with contemporaries like Steven Spielberg, George Lucas, and Francis Ford Coppola changing the landscape of film right alongside him. This environment of creativity and ambition helped push Carpenter's vision, as he aimed not just to make films, but to shape entire genres. In 1969, Carpenter directed his first short film, Captain Voyeur, a darkly humorous story about an office worker with disturbing voyeuristic tendencies. Although a student project, Captain Voyeur showed early signs of what would become Carpenter's signature style: a deep understanding of suspense, tension, and the dark corners of human psychology. You could already see his potential for creating complex atmospheres that draw you in and make you feel just a bit uneasy. Fast forward a few years to 1974, and Carpenter made his feature debut with Dark Star, a sci-fi comedy that he co-wrote with his USC classmate Dan O'Bannon. Shot on a shoestring budget, Dark Star was an ambitious project blending science fiction with black comedy, and it hinted at his future talent for making the most of limited resources. Despite the challenges of indie filmmaking, Dark Star managed to capture Carpenter's unique mix of humor, suspense, and atmosphere laying the groundwork for his future cult classics. After Dark Star, Carpenter's career began to take off, setting him on a path that would make him one of the most influential directors in horror. From his early days experimenting with genre to his mastery of building atmospheric dread, Carpenter's career is a testament to how a distinct vision and creative resilience can redefine a genre. And that's just the beginning. Each of his films has a story behind it. And over the course of this season, we'll try to get into every twist, turn, and terrifying moment of John Carpenter's journey through film. So let's talk about how John Carpenter went from USC film student to full-blown horror legend. His big break came in 1978 with Halloween, a movie that changed everything in the horror genre. Made on a budget of about $300,000 and filmed in just 20 days, Halloween wasn't just another slasher. It was a phenomenon. Carpenter didn't just direct Halloween, he also composed its iconic score. And with that chilling, repetitive piano riff written in just a few days, Carpenter proved that a simple soundtrack could elevate a film's tension in a way audiences hadn't experienced before. Halloween introduced us to The Shape, Michael Myers, a masked killer who was more than just a man. He was a force of pure evil. Carpenter's direction and inventive camera work made Michael a looming, unstoppable figure. He used long takes and eerie, empty frames to create an overwhelming sense of dread. And he gave horror something new with Michael's character. A killer who had no motive, no backstory, and no remorse, embodying the fear of the unknown. Halloween went on to gross over $70 million, proving that even with limited resources, Carpenter could create something that would haunt audiences for decades. After Halloween, Carpenter didn't stop. Instead, he kept evolving. Each new project showed off a different facet of it and added another layer to his legacy. The Fog took ghost stories to a whole new level, creating atmosphere and tension in a creepy, fog-shrouded seaside town. Then there was Escape from New York, a post-apocalyptic action thriller that introduces us to Snake Plissken, a character who'd go on to become one of cinema's most iconic anti-heroes. This wasn't just horror anymore. Carpenter was showcasing his ability to blend genres, tackling suspense, sci-fi, and action with equal skill. And then, in 1982, Carpenter released what many consider his masterpiece, The Thing. While it flopped at the box office initially, overshadowed by the blockbuster success of E.T., The Thing has since risen to legendary status. Set in the icy isolation of Antarctica, the film follows a group of researchers who discover a shape-shifting alien that can assume the identity of any living thing. This film pushed the boundaries with its practical effects, courtesy of Rod Bottin, which were so disturbingly realistic that they're still a benchmark for creature effects in horror today. Carpenter's direction here was masterful, building paranoia and suspense to unbearable levels. The Thing became a horror classic and cemented Carpenter's reputation as a true horror visionary. With each new film, Carpenter pushed the envelope, challenging both himself and the expectations of horror audiences. His works like Christine, Prince of Darkness, and They Live continued to explore complex themes like identity, social control, and even consumerism, adding depth to the thrills and chills. By the mid-'80s, Carpenter had proven he wasn't just riding the wave of slasher popularity. He was redefining what horror could be. His stories were eerie, his characters unforgettable, and his settings dripped with atmosphere. Carpenter had officially earned his place as a horror legend, and in the process, he created some of the most iconic films in cinema history. One of the reasons John Carpenter's films stand out is his instantly recognizable style. Carpenter doesn't just tell a story, he crafts an experience. His characters are often isolated in hostile environments, cut off from help and forced to confront unimaginable horrors. Take Laurie Strode in Halloween, left alone in a suburban nightmare. Or the crew in The Thing, stranded in Antarctic research station with a shape-shifting alien. Carpenter uses these closed-off settings to build a feeling of claustrophobia and tension that pulls us in. He understands that when characters are isolated, every shadow, every sound, and every heartbeat becomes a potential threat. Carpenter is also known for his pacing. He's a master of the slow burn suspense, which stands in contrast to the jump scare heavy approach of modern horror. Rather than shocking us with sudden frights, Carpenter lets tension simmer, building up dread through atmosphere and anticipation. He knows exactly when to hold back and when to let loose, often keeping us on the edge of our seats, waiting for the inevitable terror lurking just around the corner. And of course, there's his music. Carpenter doesn't just direct his films, he scores them too. His synth-heavy soundtracks are as iconic as the movies themselves. From the relentless, pulsing beats of Halloween to the ominous driving rhythms of Escape from New York and Prince of Darkness, Carpenter's music isn't just background noise, it's a character in its own right. His minimalist compositions create a sense of unease, tapping into our primal fear of the unknown. There's something about that simple, repetitive Halloween theme that hooks into your nerves and refuses to let go. I close my eyes and it's right there. Carpenter once said that music is 50% of the moving-going experience, and his work proves it. What's fascinating about Carpenter's music is that it feels timeless. His use of synthesizers wasn't just a product of the 70s and 80s. It was a conscious choice to create a sound that was unsettling and otherworldly. This choice paid off. His soundtracks have become almost as influential as his films. In fact, his music has inspired a whole generation of electronic artists and filmmakers. Carpenter has created soundscapes that are as influential as any horror score out there, and it's no surprise that many of his themes are instantly recognizable, even to people who have never seen the films. So in this series, we'll not only explore the stories, characters, and terrifying moments Carpenter has crafted, but we'll also dig into his music, examining how these iconic soundscapes shape the tone and keep audiences on edge. Carpenter's style isn't just about what's on screen. It's about how every element, visual, auditory, and emotional, comes together to create an unforgettable cinematic experience. So what can you expect from this season? Well, buckle up because we're going to dive deep into John Carpenter's entire filmography, starting with his heavy hitters and working our way through his cult classics, underrated gems, and divisive works. We'll kick things off with Halloween, the landmark slasher film that put Carpenter on the map. We'll dissect how he created the ultimate horror masterpiece on a shoestring budget, using minimalist techniques to craft suspense, atmosphere, and an iconic villain in Michael Myers. From there, we'll dive into Dark Star, Carpenter's first feature. This low-budget sci-fi comedy, made while he was still a USC film student, showcases his early skill at blending humor and tension, an approach that would define much of his work. Then it's time for The Thing, Carpenter's chilling masterpiece of paranoia, isolation, and groundbreaking effects. We'll explore why this film remains one of the greatest horror movies ever made. From there, we expand the conversation with Escape from New York, where Carpenter introduces us to Snake Plissken in a dystopian sci-fi action classic. And Christine, his take on Stephen King's Killer Car that mixes supernatural horror with a tragic story of obsession and revenge. We'll also take a look at The Fog, a ghostly tale of atmosphere and dread that solidified Carpenter's reputation as a master of slow-building tension. Next, we'll shine a spotlight on some of Carpenter's underrated films. They Live blends biting social commentary with Carpenter's signature mix of action and horror, while Prince of Darkness dives into the unsettling intersection of science and the supernatural, and Starman shows a completely different side of Carpenter, delivering a heartfelt sci-fi romance that stands out in his filmography. As we move further into his career, we'll explore Carpenter's boldest and most debated projects. Big Trouble in Little China combines martial arts, fantasy, and comedy in a way that's uniquely Carpenter. In the Mouth of Madness takes us on a mind-bending journey into the nature of reality, and Village of the Damned offers an eerie remake of the 1960 classic. We'll also tackle some of Carpenter's polarizing works, such as Assault on Precinct 13, a gritty, raw exploration of urban crime and survival, and Escape from LA, the divisive sequel to Escape from New York. And then there's Memoirs of an Invisible Man, which divided audiences with its mix of comedy, sci-fi, and drama. Finally, we'll wrap up the season with looks at Carpenter's later work. Films like Vampires, The Ghosts of Mars, and The Ward represent his final forays into filmmaking and offer a chance to reflect on how his legacy evolved over time. Throughout this season, we'll examine Carpenter's unparalleled ability to merge genres, whether it's horror, sci-fi, action, fantasy, comedy, or even romance, and how his films explore the darker sides of society, human nature, and even his own anxieties. This season is going to be an exciting journey into the world of John Carpenter, a director who reshaped the horror genre and whose work continues to haunt and inspire audiences today. John Carpenter's influence on the horror genre is nothing short of monumental. He didn't just make scary movies, he redefined what horror could be, pushing the boundaries of the genre and shaping the very way we experience fear on screen. One of his greatest contributions was the focus on atmosphere. While many horror films of the time relied heavily on gore or shock value, Carpenter took a more restrained approach, making the environment itself a character in his stories. Whether it's the foggy, oppressive streets of The Fog or the claustrophobic, paranoia-fueled setting of The Thing, Carpenter created spaces that feel alive with tension. His mastery of pacing and the slow burn suspense is something that many contemporary filmmakers are still trying to emulate today. But Carpenter's influence doesn't stop at atmosphere. His use of music is legendary. As we mentioned, Carpenter doesn't just direct his movies, he composes most of the scores as well. In doing so, he elevated his films to a whole new level of tension and dread. The iconic synth-heavy melodies of Halloween, Escape from New York, and Prince of Darkness are just as integral to the storytelling as the actors and the dialogue. Those eerie, pulsating sounds have become synonymous with horror itself, and they've even inspired a whole wave of filmmakers, from David Lynch to the Stranger Things creators, the Duffer Brothers, to embrace the power of minimalist electronic soundtracks. Carpenter's music isn't just a backdrop, it is the character that intensifies every moment of fear, excitement, and anticipation. And then there's his groundbreaking use of practical effects, especially in The Thing. The grotesque, mind-bending creature transformations in that film set a new benchmark for horror. In an era when CGI was still in its infancy, Carpenter and his team, led by legendary effects artist Rob Bottin, achieved some of the most visceral, disturbing special effects ever seen in cinema at the time. The practical effects in The Thing remain nearly unmatched to this day, and its influence can be seen in the work of modern filmmakers like Guillermo del Toro, who is known for his love of practical effects in films like Pan's Labyrinth. Even though CGI has taken over much of modern horror, the commitment to tangible, in-camera effects that Carpenter championed continues to inspire filmmakers who want to bring real, physical horror to life. Beyond the technical elements, Carpenter's films are also deeply thematic. He was one of the first to explore the themes of paranoia, isolation, and human vulnerability so profoundly. In The Thing, the real horror isn't just the alien parasite. It's the sense of total distrust that takes over this isolated group of men. Carpenter's ability to tap into those universal fears, the fear of being alone, misunderstood, betrayed, all work to make his films resonate on a much, much deeper level. These themes were ahead of their time in many ways that still feel relevant today. Take They Live, for example. This 1988 sci-fi horror film is not just about aliens. It's about a system of control, economic inequality, and the hidden realities that we're all blind to. Themes that feel eerily prescient in our current political climate. Carpenter's legacy, however, extends far beyond the realm of horror. His influence is noticed in the work of modern directors like Guillermo del Toro, Jordan Peele, and Robert Rodriguez, who all have cited him as a major inspiration. Peele, in particular, has acknowledged Carpenter's ability to blend horror with social commentary, something Peele has done masterfully in his own films, such as Get Out and Us. It's clear that Carpenter's exploration of societal fears and his ability to mix the fantastical with the real continues to inspire filmmakers who not only want to entertain, but also provoke thought and discussion. And of course, Carpenter's contributions to pop culture are undeniable. Who doesn't recognize Michael Myers' white, expressionless mask? A symbol of pure terror that has become as iconic as any in horror history. Or the unforgettable "Obey" slogan from They Live, which has been repurposed and referenced in countless other media, becoming a symbol of social and political dissent. Carpenter's films have given us more than just horror. They've given us cultural touchstones. His influence runs deep, from Halloween merchandise to music samples in hip-hop, to visual references in video games and television shows. Ultimately, Carpenter's impact on the genre is so ingrained in the fabric of horror that it's difficult to imagine a world without his work. His films continue to be a blueprint for filmmakers looking to create genuine, lasting fear, and his stories still haunt us because they touch on things we can relate to. Our deepest fears, our vulnerabilities, and our desire to survive the impossible. John Carpenter didn't just make films. He changed the way we think about horror, And that's why his legacy will endure for generations to come. This season is shaping up to be an absolute thrill ride for horror fans and Carpenter enthusiasts alike. We're about to take a deep dive into the twisted, electrifying world of John Carpenter. And trust me, each episode is going to leave you with plenty to think about. We're not just talking about the films. We'll explore the stories, the unforgettable characters, the artistry behind the camera, and of course, the lasting impact Carpenter's work has had on not just horror, but cinema as a whole. Now, to kick things off next week, we'll be starting off, as I mentioned, with Carpenter's biggest hit. We are going to start with Halloween, where it all began for many of us, maybe the scariest movie some of us have ever seen, and without doubt, the most influential slasher film ever made. So before we take off into the madness, make sure you subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss a single episode. And hey, follow us on Instagram and Threads at Real Talk to get all the latest updates. I want to hear from you, your favorite Carpenter moments, quotes, or any memories you have from his movies. Share them with us. You might just hear your thoughts featured in an upcoming episode. Thanks for tuning in to the first stop on this eerie, synthesizer-fueled journey through John Carpenter's filmography, where we're going to take you on a ride that's filled with suspense, chills, and plenty of wild, twisted fun. So I want you to keep watching, I want you to keep loving horror, and most importantly, stay tuned for the thrills ahead. I'll see you here next time on Real Talk Horror. Until then, stay spooky.